DND number 10, Circle of Life in Jesus' Name, Part 2, Chapter 9. It's September 14th, Saturday morning, at the South Keno Estate, Crystal Cove, California. It'd taken the good part of 15 minutes, but Taylor was finally down to small hiccups and hitched breaths as she cried against her father's chest. Ricky sighed. All is not lost, sweetheart. Gabe is with you 100%, and so is your family. Now, this can all be fixed, but right now, I need you to pull yourself together because you have to be at volleyball practice in a few hours. All those people are saying such horrible things about me. Bree sighed. Sweetheart, you know better than to pay attention to what people say on social media, or on mainstream media for that matter. The public is fickle, and you know that. And as soon as we have the interview with Isla, they're all going to change their minds. I don't want to go to volleyball practice, she whispered. Taylor, we do not run and hide, Ricky said firmly. We stand up and we take it. We do not cower, and you will go into practice with your head held high. Taylor, Bree began, you are not the one in the wrong here. Lance took advantage of you. But why? Why did he do that? Think about it and you tell me, Ricky said. Taylor drew a deep breath and sat up. For the publicity? Right. It had probably been his intention the whole time. He even told me at your game that he'd do anything to be famous. Taylor sniffed. And now he is. He's famous for being the guy who broke up me and Gabe. Bree touched her daughter's face. Only he didn't break you up. And everyone will know that by the end of the day. A lot of people will know even before you get to practice because Isla is waiting on you to pull yourself together, get dressed, do your hair, and do a remote interview with her. So here's what your mother and I really want to know, Ricky began. This is the important thing. You see, we have the power to really crush this kid. He actually assaulted you. We could get him suspended for at least one of his games, maybe all of them. We could make it where his life is in total shambles. Take away his last year of playing football, destroy his reputation completely, or we could play it another way. We could do what our Savior has asked us to do, and that is to forgive him. Forgive him and urge him to do better. I mean, he's just a kid. He made a mistake. As soon as we set the record straight in the interview, he's going to realize it's him who looks bad. And that will be punishment enough. But baby, that's up to you. Which path would you like us to pursue? There is only one thing that we won't do. What's that? Nothing. We won't sit idly by and do nothing. That's not how we operate. We're not cowards and we're not lazy. So let me ask you, baby girl, which way are you leaning? It didn't seem like a very hard choice to Taylor. She nodded her head. Well, of course, I'll follow the Savior and take the choice to forgive him. She smiled. As a matter of fact, as I just now said those words, I had a feeling of peace come over me. I actually feel like a huge weight just lifted off my shoulders. Ricky smiled and nodded his approval. He knew that feeling. It was real, that feeling of peace that comes over you when you take the higher road and the Holy Spirit touches you. 30 minutes later, Taylor signed into a Zoom meeting with Isla August at teenspotter.com. Good morning, Taylor Keno, Isla beamed. Let me just say thank you right now for taking the time to speak with me and our followers so early this morning. Thank you, Taylor said softly. So everyone knows why we're so interested in speaking with you this morning. We all woke up to pictures of you and hashtag QBLance all over YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, and we all knew instantly that something wasn't quite right. So I'm so grateful that I was able to come straight to the source and find out what really happened at the big Brookside High School football game last night. Taylor smiled and nodded. It seems to be the topic of the day. Well, we're going to cut right to the chase. We all know that you have strong feelings for our beloved Gabriel Tanner, and he has them for you. We just love a good love story. So you can imagine how it shocked people to see you kissing another guy. Taylor nodded. Well, let me set it straight right now. I wasn't kissing him. He was kissing me. I barely know him. He asked me to come out to the football game because he came to see our volleyball game. Taylor went on to tell exactly what happened, ending with, and I had to fight a little to get him to back off, and then I ran away from him, and that was that. Oh my. What did you do after that? I called Gabe. I hated to wake him up, but I was upset. And what did he do? Well, he calmed me down and helped me to understand why it happened. He's always so calm and so strong. Just talking to him always makes me feel better. I bet. He's such a good guy. Yeah, he is. So what now? What are you going to do about Lance? Well, there's really nothing to do, Isla pressed. I mean, are you angry with him? No, not anymore. I mean, I understand. He wanted some free publicity and he got it. He went about it all wrong, but I forgive him. Funny thing is, he didn't really need to try to steal a kiss from me to get publicity. I mean, he is the quarterback for our high school, and he's actually a good one. And how do you know he's good? Well, my cousin, JoJo Adams, is a Heisman candidate, and my family knows a good ball player when they see one, and they tell me that Lance is really good, and that all he has to do is keep on playing like he is, and he'll probably get a scholarship, probably to a D1 school. He didn't have to do what he did to get noticed. Anyway, that's what my father says. So you truly forgive him for taking advantage of you? Sure. Though I'm not sure how Gabe feels about that, she said with a laugh. Well, why don't we ask him, Isla said, as she hit a button and Gabe joined the meeting. Hey, Taylor, Gabe said softly. Gabe, I didn't know you were going to be on this call. He chuckled. Surprise. Well, good morning, Gabe Tanner, Isla said. So, answer the question for us. We were wondering if you will be just as forgiving toward #QBLance as Taylor. Well, I can forgive him because I think he must not have been thinking very clearly. He made a mistake. What he did was very close to assault, though let's not let it get all blown out of proportion. What he did was steal a kiss from the sweetest girl in the world. But what he also did was steal a kiss from my girl. And I can forgive him, but I'm also going to have to make sure he understands that there are always consequences for our actions. And from this point forward, he needs to keep his hands off her. But I'm sure he's sorry for what he did. It certainly wasn't the actions of a D1 QB, and he'll probably want to make amends in some way, if only through an apology. Those are wise words, Isla said. Well, they're not my words. Jesus teaches us to forgive because we sure as heck aren't perfect ourselves. I'm sure not. I make lots of mistakes. Like, my first thought was to go find this Lance guy and wipe that smile from his face. But I mean, he's still a minor, but he'll be 18 soon enough. And then I had to stop and think and pray and do what Jesus would have me do, which is to forgive. Lance wanted a little fame. Fine, here it is. I watched the game. You're a talented athlete, dude. Go out and do something with that. Work hard, train, practice. You've already got what it takes to go far. Do it with integrity. Isla sighed. Again, Gabe, you never cease to amaze me. Is there anything else either one of you want to tell our audience before you go? Just thanks for giving me this opportunity to tell what really happened, Taylor said, and to say publicly that I would never disrespect Gabe in any way. And I would say the same exact thing, Gabe added. Thanks for the chance to set things straight, and that I totally trust and believe in Taylor. She is a blessing in my life. Okay, well, what an awesome way to begin our Saturday with all these warm fuzzies. Gabe and Taylor, you are both such wonderful examples of our nation's youth. Keep up the good work, and goodbye to my awesome loyal followers. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. Hit that button right now and hit the like button too, and we'll let you know the next time we have an exclusive. For now, I'm Isla August with teenspotter.com. Have a great day. Isla ended the call and then said goodbye to Gabe and Taylor and ended the meeting. Gabe immediately placed a call to Taylor. Hey, she said. Hey, Tay. So what do you think? You're on speaker, Gabe. I think you both were brilliant, Bree said. I concur, Ricky said. Good job, you two. Gabe blew out a breath. So, Taylor, do you feel better? Much. And you're going to go to volleyball practice? Yes, according to my dad. There was never any question. I was going to go no matter what. But I feel much better about it now. Gabe smiled. Good. Take me off speaker. Okay, we're off. I just want to say I love you before I hang up. Taylor smiled. Me too. New scene. It's September 14th, early Saturday afternoon at the Perez home, Hillcrest, California. Young Eric pulled up in front of the tiny, single-story, sand-colored home in the small suburb of Hillcrest, about 10 miles north and 10 miles east of Laguna Beach. He parked on the street in front of the house because there were already 2 cars in the small driveway. Most of the other homes in the cramped neighborhood were the same sandy brown color, with a few green or white houses interspersed. The tiny yard was neatly trimmed. It couldn't be any more than a 12 by 12 expanse of green, with an additional 4-foot width strip between a sidewalk and the street. Eric spotted Jordan's car in the driveway next to an older model faded red PT Cruiser. He glanced at some children playing in the yard across the street. They looked at him as he got out of his car, and he smiled. A little girl waved at him. He waved back. He headed to the front door, which had white iron burglar bars on it, though the front picture window to the left of the front door did not. He knocked on the outer barred door twice before the door opened, and beautiful Jordan smiled up at him. 3, she said, as if she hadn't expected him. He smiled. Hello, Jordan. She stepped back. Come on in. He stepped through the door into a small living room that contained a sofa, a chair, and 2 small tables at either end of the sofa, holding matching lamps. The floors were some kind of laminate tile, and in the living room there was a worn gray area rug. Jordan looked up at him. He looked larger here in her tiny home. Did you grow? He grinned. Nope, still at 6'2". You? I'm still 5'9", she said with a giggle. She turned away and called, Mom, he's here. Young Eric looked past Jordan into a small dining room, and from there he could see the entryway to a kitchen. The woman who emerged from there was of average height and build, with short, light brown hair and smiling, hazel-colored eyes. Hello, she said softly. Eric immediately realized she was a little shy. It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Oh, I guess it's not Brooks, huh? Oh, no, it's Perez, Jordan said. Jewel Perez. Eric held his hand out. Mrs. Perez, it's nice to meet you. She smiled sweetly as he shook her hand. You too, Mr. Keno. He laughed. I'm just Eric, or as Jordan prefers to call me, 3. She nodded. Okay, I'll call you Eric. Will you have a seat? I've made some lemonade and some of my famous oatmeal cookies. Would you like some? I would love some, he said with a smile. He sat down at one end of the sofa and smiled up at Jordan. Are you going to sit with me? In a minute, I'm going to go get my brother and sister. I told them to stay in their rooms until I get them. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to get a word in edgewise. He grabbed her hand before she could walk away. Are you okay? She nodded. I guess I feel a little nervous or awkward or something. Well, don't be. I promise not to cause any trouble, he joked. It's not you I'm worried about. She turned and headed down a short hall. He watched her disappear behind a closed door. A few seconds later, a boy ran into the living room with a little girl and Jordan right behind. He remembered Jordan had said her brother was 8, but he seemed small for his age, and he had dark brown hair and large brown eyes. Eric stood. Well, hello there. I'm Eric. He held out his hand. The boy shook his hand. Hi, I'm Jamie. Is Ricky Keno really your dad? Eric laughed. He is. Why, have you seen some of his movies? Sure, I've seen lots. I really like Ninja Battle. It's my favorite. Eric nodded. Yeah, that's an old one from when he was really young. Maybe just a little older than you. Yeah, he's totally cool. I'll tell him you said so. He turned to smile at the girl and held his hand out to her. Hello, I'm Eric. She shook his hand very gently. Hi. This is Josie, Jordan supplied. It's a pleasure to meet you, Josie, Eric said. He looked her over. She also seemed small for her 10 years, and she too had dark brown hair and brown eyes, and Eric looked from face to face. I think I detect a theme here. Jordan smiled. Yes, we all have J names. But not my father, Jamie said. His name is Peter. I see, Eric said, noticing Jordan's worried look. Mrs. Perez came in with a plate full of cookies and lemonade in a glass that had pictures of lemons on it. Thank you, ma'am. This looks delicious. Jamie, Josie, go grab a glass for yourselves, please, Mrs. Perez commanded. Jordan, I'll go get yours. Mom, sit down, please, Jordan said firmly as she went to get lemonade for herself and her mother. Eric picked up one of the large cookies and took a bite. Mrs. Perez, this is delicious. Oh, it's so good, he said as he spoke with a mouthful. He took a few swallows of lemonade as the kids and Jordan came back in, grabbed a cookie, and sat down. Jordan handed her mother a glass of lemonade. Eric immediately noticed that the kids both had plastic cups that came from the convenience store, and Jordan had a quart-sized mason jar, and her mother had a glass that matched his own. Do you mind if I have a second cookie? He asked. They are so good. Jewel Perez grinned. That was everyone's usual reaction to her cooking, whether it was baked goods or three-course meals. Well, I'm so happy you like them. I love to cook. Are you a chef? She laughed along with Jordan. No, I'm a receptionist at a dental office, but I really love to cook. Sometimes I pick up an extra job cooking for someone's party or a quinceañera or one time for a wedding. Really, maybe I can finagle a dinner invitation one day. You love to cook. I love to eat. It's a match made in heaven. Jewel's face glowed with light. Will you just let me know when? I'd love to cook for you. Jordan smiled at him. He glanced at her and winked, then looked back at Mrs. Perez. I'll check my schedule, but let's make it happen soon. He then turned to Jordan's brother. So, Jamie, you like my father's movies, huh? I like them a lot, so much. Does that mean you like martial arts? Oh, yeah. One day I want to be like Ricky Kino. Really? Do you take lessons? Nah, he said sadly, but I try to do some karate stuff when I watch it in movies. Eric nodded. Karate is a Japanese style of martial arts. My father and I, we do something called Zendo-ryu, which is like karate and Muay Thai and Taekwondo and several other styles, all mixed into one. He stood. Come stand in front of me. Wide-eyed, the boy stood, put his glass down, and moved to stand in front of Eric. Now, attention. Put your feet like this, hands by your side. He did as shown. Bow. Jamie bowed, and Eric bowed to him. Good. Now step back with your right foot. Hands up like this, fists closed. Good. That is your first fighting stance. Jordan watched him with such pride. Though his jeans were loose-fitting, one could tell he had muscular thighs and backside. His stomach was flat. He wore a USC team shirt that showed his broad shoulders. Eric knelt in front of him. Now, I want you to try to punch me. Right in the eye. Right here, he said, pointing at his left eye. Use your right fist. Ready? Jamie nodded. Whenever you're ready, try to trick me. Don't let me know when you're going to do it. Just punch me. I don't want to hurt you. Eric and Jordan both chuckled. You won't. Whenever you're ready. A few seconds later, Jamie swung, and Eric waved his arm and blocked Jamie. Jamie grinned. Try again, Eric commanded. Either eye, either fist. Just try to trick me. Jamie swung several more times at Eric, softly blocked each punch, making silly Bruce Lee sounds as he did. Then Eric stood. Attention. Jamie straightened. Bow. They both bowed, and Eric smiled at the boy. And that is your first lesson with Kino martial arts. Jamie grinned up at Eric. Jordan also smiled at him. Her brother was in desperate need of a male role model. Eric sat back down. One more cookie? He asked. Jewel nodded. Of course, take as many as you like. Eric chewed and looked at Josie, who was very quiet. So, tell me, Miss Josie, what kind of things do you like? She shrugged and then looked down. You don't like anything? Do you like to play softball like your sister? She looked up. Yes. And she's good at it too, Jordan added. She's just not as aggressive as me. Eric smiled at Jordan. She was looking delectable in her jeans and athletic shoes and a gold t-shirt. Her hand rested on her sister's shoulder in a protective gesture. His heart was taking a tumble. He shook it off. So, like, do you girls go out and play catch together sometimes? All the time, Jamie said. Eric nodded and pulled out his phone and glanced at the time. We have time for a little game of catch, a few minutes anyway. Where do you play? In the backyard, Jordan said. Well, Jordan nodded. Let's go. The kids went to grab gloves and balls, and while Jordan headed to her car and pulled her glove and a few more balls out of the trunk, the backyard was as narrow as the front yard, but longer. Eric noticed a tattered-looking practice net pushed up under the back of the house. Eric walked to the very back of the yard and positioned himself near the small chain-link fence so that no balls would get by into the neighbor's yard. Jordan joined him. While Jewel Perez watched, Jordan and young Eric toss softballs back and forth to Josie and Jamie. Eric had no glove with him and had to make sure he didn't get hit in the face, but more importantly, he made sure to watch Josie and compliment her on her throwing motion. He finally got a smile out of her, and after about 10 minutes, Eric stopped and glanced at Jordan. Well, I guess we better get going, but next time we'll plan for a longer visit, maybe go to a park or something. Yes, that would be awesome, Jamie said. But before we go, do you guys know that I have never seen Jordan pitch? What do you say, 2-3? Will you toss me a few? She laughed. I don't know if you can handle it. Eric nodded. Maybe not, but we'll never know until I try. Come on. I used to play baseball in high school. If anything, I'll be able to knock the ball down. She sighed. Okay. She motioned at her sister. Will you let him borrow your glove? Josie nodded and took Eric the glove. It was an adult glove, but still too small for him, but he shoved his hand in the best he could. Eric watched Jordan walk to a worn area in the grass. Her siblings gathered all the balls and laid them at her feet. Eric knelt, hit his glove a few times with his fist and made a target for her. She fired it in. Whoa, he said. Her family giggled. She threw again, a little wide, but he got it. She fired in several more until one went over his head and into the neighbor's yard. He quickly hopped the fence, ran across the yard, grabbed the ball, ran back, and hopped over the fence again before he could get caught in another person's yard. Jamie's mouth opened wide. Wow. Eric smiled at him, and Jordan came forward. I think that's enough. Eric nodded. Well, it was so nice to meet you all. Please come again, Mrs. Perez said as Eric took her hand. I will, he promised. He shook hands with Josie and Jamie. It was nice to meet you guys. The kids nodded. Jordan instructed the kids to gather up all the balls and put their gloves away. She carried a few balls in her own glove out to her car and put them away, then went back and said her goodbyes to her family. He watched her as she came back out to his car. Her eyes were scanning the street both ways, making him look to see if a car was coming, but there was none. Eric held the car door open for Jordan as she climbed in. He smiled at her. Your family is great. She nodded. Thanks. I love them so much. I can see that, he said as he closed the door. He got in the car and immediately reached into the back seat. I brought this for you. I figured since you went to UCLA, you wouldn't be caught owning Trojan colors. She smiled. You're right about that. She opened a small bag and pulled out a Trojan jersey, turned and smiled at him. Thanks. This is awesome. You don't have to wear it. Your gold shirt is close enough. I'm happy to wear it to support your brother. Eric started the car and pulled away from the curb, but almost wrecked when she pulled her gold shirt over her head. She had on a small tank top, and he swallowed hard. Her arms were well muscled. He watched her pull the Trojan jersey over her head and then turn and smile at him. How do I look? He shook his head. Beautiful. She pulled the visor down and glanced in the mirror, then peered behind her. Is something wrong? He asked. She smiled at him. Not really. Jamie told me that his father stopped by yesterday when I was watching you train. It's the first time in a long time. Was your mother home? No. And he's not supposed to do that. It's supposed to be supervised visits only. Not that I want my mother dealing with him either. It's just a precarious situation at best. Eric nodded. I don't like it. And I think your family needs some law advice. Would you mind if I talk to my Uncle Mark about the situation to see if anything can be done? Jordan looked down and chewed on her lip. No, I guess I don't mind. I mean, I feel powerless to help my family, so I guess I'll accept any help offered. Good. Then while we're at it, did you know that there is a Kino Martial Arts at that Pavilion Shopping Center about a mile from your house? She nodded. Sure, but it won't do Jamie any good because, to put it bluntly, we can't afford to pay for martial arts lessons. Eric nodded. I get that. But what if Jamie does a little audition and gets a full scholarship to the school? An audition? Yes. I'll teach him some basics. He practices really hard to show that he's willing to learn and work hard, and then he auditions. And if the master at that studio sees potential, he can offer him a scholarship. You would do that for Jamie? Of course, and not just because he's your brother. God puts certain people in our path. We can ignore the situation or act on it. I try to always act on what God shows me. Jordan gazed over at this guy who so quickly seems to be becoming a major part of her life. He'd kissed her yesterday, kissed her in a way she'd never been kissed before, and she'd felt it all the way to her toes, or more importantly, all the way to her heart. She wasn't sure if she wanted this to happen. Was she just setting herself up for disappointment or even heartbreak? After all, he was a big, important celebrity-type deal. He was a much sought-after bachelor. He was ultra-good-looking, ultra-masculine, and ultra-rich. He had power oozing from every part of his being. She didn't have some kind of inferiority complex where she didn't think she was good enough for him, but she was also a realist, and realistically, how could he be interested in someone like her? Eric stole glances at the beautiful girl beside him as they rode. She was apparently deep in thought. Was she thinking about him? Hold on. No matter when I read, the train always comes by. It's funny. She was apparently deep in thought. Was she thinking about him? He hoped so. She was perfect for him, perfect in every way, and he'd just fallen in love with her family, and her protectiveness toward them made him fall even further. She came from humble beginnings, that much was evident. He found he wanted to change that for her family, and he knew he had the power to do just that, though not by giving them a handout. They wouldn't accept a handout anyway, but he knew he could open their eyes and maybe give them a hand up. She glanced back at him. So, I saw this morning that there was some drama going on with Taylor. He smiled. Yeah, she was pretty upset when she first woke up this morning. She cried for a long time, and then with the help of my parents and some prayer, she bucked up. I couldn't stick around to help because I had an appointment on the beach with my grandfather. Oh yeah, so how did your training go today? He laughed. Not quite as hard as yesterday, and I only threw up once. She giggled. I don't know how you do it. I just make it from 1 minute to the next. I don't look beyond the next request of my trainer. Eventually, we'll get past the stamina problem and move into the reaction times and fight sequences. But right now, I just keep my eyes on whatever exercise I'm being told to do. I am so in awe of you. He gave a soft laugh. Well, my ego likes that, but it makes me afraid of disappointing you. I don't think that's possible. He smiled. He hoped not. They continued to chat as they drove. They talked about conditioning and practice for softball. They talked about her coming back to a few of his training sessions. They talked about her wanting to see Taylor's volleyball games every Tuesday and Thursday. And they talked about her siblings, and that led to talking about his new aunt and uncles, and he explained exactly how that came about, which totally blew her away. It's funny how much they look alike, Jordan said. Eric nodded. If you look at my baby pictures, they look almost exactly like me, and Taylor, and Jeffy. They are so freaking cute, she said. This morning I saw a video of this kid who lives up like somewhere, I think in Northern California. He reminds me of your Aunt Jeffy because he's really smart, and he looks almost exactly like your new uncles and you. Eric looked at her sharply. Do you think you can find that video again? Yes, because I subscribed. Why? Because there is a fifth child, a boy, that was given away when he was a baby, and there's no record of who he was given to, and no one admits to having any information about him. We're all sick over thinking that we have a member of our family out there somewhere, and we have no idea what's happening to him. My grandmother is extremely distraught over it. It's like a dark shadow hanging over her head all the time, making her feel sad when her mind isn't occupied. Wow, I can imagine. She pulled out her phone and pulled up the video. Someone is calling out math problems to him, and he's giving the answers correctly, and he looks about the same age as your uncles. Eric's heart was racing. He couldn't get to their destination fast enough, and when he finally pulled into the parking lot at the LA Memorial Coliseum, he swung into his usual spot, turned the car off, and took her phone. His eyes filled with tears. The child did look exactly like his new uncles. He shared the video to himself and then pulled it up on his own encrypted phone and sent it to his father, his grandfather, and to Jason with the message, "What do you think?" The reply came from Jason. "We'll know soon enough. Good find. Way to go." He wrote back, "Wasn't my find, it was Jordan." And Jason replied, "Let's keep this to ourselves until we track the child down and get DNA samples. There's no need to get Shelley's hopes up until we know for certain." And Eric responded, "If he's ours, then there's going to be a fight because this is a monetized channel and they have a bunch of subscribers, probably making a boatload of money on this kid." Jason replied, this time with only a thumbs up. Young Eric looked over at Jordan, who'd been sitting patiently while he was texting. "Sorry, this is a big deal." "I totally get it." "Of course you do," he said with a smile. He got out of the car, circled around to open her door, and pulled her to her feet. "What is that supposed to mean?" "I mean, you totally get it, because, Jordan, you are perfect in every way." Her sudden laugh came out as a snort, which made her laugh harder. "Hey, so Jason says to not tell anyone else about the boy in the video until we know for sure, just to save Grandma from any more heartache." Jordan nodded. "My lips are sealed. Your grandmother is the sweetest." "Yes, she is." He stopped and leaned her against the car, moved close, touched a lock of her hair. "Are you ready to go in and cheat on your school by cheering for their biggest rival?" She laughed. "Yes, I am." "Well, before we go in, I need to do something so that I can concentrate on the game." "What's that?" "This," he murmured as he leaned down and kissed her. The moment his lips touched her, she felt so much warmth and contentment, like she'd been craving something and she didn't know what until this moment. She made a soft sighing sound in the back of her throat, which made him pull away. He smiled at her. "What?" she asked, wondering why he stopped. "That sound you made, it's intoxicating. I had to stop to get back a little control." "You like being in control?" "In control of myself, yes. Being master over one's own self, it's what we strive for. But with you, I'm losing ground," he said, as he took her hands and placed them up around his neck, then wrapped his arms around her, pulled her close, and kissed her thoroughly. He lifted her and placed her on the fender of his car as she gave a little squeal. Their lips melded, and Jordan felt like she could stay like this forever, which she suddenly realized frightened her. She was in school, working hard to make something of herself, to open a wellness clinic to help people like her father, people dying of cancer. Using Dr. Kino's method, she could really help people. And she also wanted to be successful so that she could give her mother and siblings a better life. She didn't want to get distracted from her goals, but Eric Kino III was a force to reckon with. She didn't know how to deal with her own heart that couldn't stop yearning to be close to this guy. "Get a room!" someone yelled as they drove by, horn blaring and people laughing. Eric pulled away with a laugh. "I guess we'd better head inside." And that is the end of chapter 9.